So I probably began to fall in love with Zara while chatting to her on the phone after she had moved to Australia in 2010. We'd been good friends since I was 15, and when she had finished school, she decided to do a gap year at a Christian campsite in the mountains of Australia. When she went away, there were a limited number of people who stayed in touch, but we would talk regularly for hours, and the internet was limited, so she would buy call cards to make international calls, if you remember those days. She would talk about the groups that would stay, the things she learned about God and herself, and the adventures she had been on. I would talk about Minecraft, post-hardcore music, and who had made the cut to my top friends list on Bebo. Long phone conversations were sometimes interrupted by the strangeness of the Australian wildlife. I not only heard stories of snakes and scorpions and huntsman spiders as her claim of fame to teaching a horse to shake hands, but I would also get live commentary on wombats walking by or mobs of kangaroos bounding past. One night we were chatting and there was an extremely loud bang, and I was worried that Zara might have combusted in the Australian heat. But Zara reassured me that it was just a kamikaze cockatoo who had crashed full speed into the window. Lord rest his soul. The late New Zealand spiritual director and writer Sheila Pritchard, who some people here are actually connected with, wrote this about the Australian outback. A visitor to an Australian outback cattle station was intrigued by the seemingly endless miles of farming country with no sign of any fences. He asked a local rancher how he kept track of his cattle. The rancher replied, "Oh, that's no problem. Out here we dig wells instead of building fences." Out here we dig wells instead of building fences. The implication, I hope, is obvious. There's no need to fence cattle in when they are highly motivated to stay within range of their source of life. Why am I talking about this in regards to today's passage? Well, we all know that Jesus associates himself closely with the least of these in our world, that our treatment is in response to them as if we are treating Christ himself this way. Later in Matthew's Gospel, we will quite famously hear, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to the one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." But when we think of the least of these, the needy, the little ones, we don't usually think of righteous preachers or prophets, do we? We think of those outside the church and outside of society, those who are on the fringes of society and well-being. But in today's gospel reading, Jesus annoyingly complicates things for us, because Jesus applies this least of these concepts to his own disciples. He calls them little ones and teaches that those who welcome them welcome him. It's the same concept as he applies to those who are hungry and thirsty in Matthew 25. Why does he do this? Well, when the prophets and preachers were on the road sharing their message, they were at the mercy of the hospitality of others. If they were thirsty or hungry or tired, they would need those, whether Christian or not, to take them in and welcome them. And preachers of the way of Jesus in the time of Jesus were not people who enjoyed social standing or status, as is sort of true today as well. These were people who were needy ones of little in material possessions and little in social standing. And so Jesus acknowledged this reality, this neediness and dependency of the disciples, and encourages others to welcome them, not merely because they are Christian, but simply because they are thirsty. What an interesting dynamic we start to see unfolding in the Gospels. Jesus teaches those in the church to care for the needy outside of the church, but Jesus also teaches those outside of the church to care for the needy inside the church. Jesus is largely uninterested in the boundaries, the fences of who is in and who is out, and ultimately declares, "I am the well in which anyone can draw from," and is declaring that he can be found mysteriously and divinely present in the serving of others. It's yet another example of Jesus collapsing our boundaries of who is in and who is out, who serves and who is to be served, and where and in whom we might find Christ present. Jesus just wants us at the well and pushes back on our fences. At the beginning of services here, I will sometimes begin with welcoming everyone, often in Te Reo Māori, and then I will sometimes, I didn't today, welcome those with much faith, little faith, or no faith. And to me, where you are on your faith journey does not define your participation or welcome in this community. There is no in or out measure or metric we use in being here. We are simply a community of people who have found a well, who want to live close to it and find life in it, and invite others to do the same. And as a priest and a vicar, I'm simply one beggar trying to tell other beggars where the bread is. And if I had to chart up what kind of community I would hope us to be, I would, ideally like us to be a little less like the chart on the left and a little more like the chart on the right. A place where it's not the walls, fences, or boundaries that we define ourselves by as a community, but that we are all on an honest journey and being sustained by the person and life of Christ. At St. Aidan's, there is no threshold of belief, of participation, of Bible knowledge, of giving, of how good you are at praying, of what your family looks like, no threshold of attendance to be here and to be a part of this family. We've just found a well, the person of Christ, and invite anyone to join us in exploring what it means to draw from it. But right from the beginning of church history, there's been a wrestle with how to show or prove you are in or out. What will be the way we distinguish ourselves from others? One of the big issues, which seems strange to us now, was circumcision. For Israel and the Jewish people, circumcision was an outward sign that you were in. And so early Christians were trying to work out whether this was a fence that was worth keeping, whether this will remain as a way of identifying as God's people. But listen to what Paul says to the church of Galatia about this. For neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything. What counts is a new creation. This is a damning attack on fences. To Paul, these in or out markers are pointless. The real question is, are you being made new? Have you found new life in Christ? Are you drawing from the well? And part of the problem with fenced-in faith is that it's static. You're either in or you're out. And once you're in, you can be part of the club and put your feet up. And if you're out, well, then why fight your way in? But to draw from the well is actually to be on an adventure. And I love how Stanley Hauerwas and Will Willimon put it. They say this: the Gospels make wonderfully clear that the disciples had not the foggiest idea of what they had gotten into when they followed Jesus. With a simple follow me, Jesus invited ordinary people to come out and be part of an adventure, a journey that keeps surprising them at every turn in the road. It is no coincidence that gospel writers chose to frame the gospel in terms of a journey. And then Jesus went to. From there, he took his disciples to. From that time, he began to teach them that. When we are baptized, we, like the first disciples, jump on a moving train. As disciples, we do not so much accept a creed or come to a clear sense of self-understanding by which we know this or that with utter certitude. We become part of a journey that began long before we got here and shall continue long after we are gone. After a baptism, a pastor said to the baby in a loud voice, loud enough to be heard by the parents and the congregation, "Little sister, by this act of baptism, we welcome you to a journey that will take your whole life. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of God's experiment with your life. What God will make of you, we know not. Where God will take you, surprise you, we cannot say. This we do know, and this we do say, God is with you." And so I wonder where you are in this particular adventure, and is it where you would like to be? Probably not, from my experience of this particular adventure. Are you drawing closer to Jesus right now? Or maybe you've been slowly drifting away from him. Perhaps Jesus is a recent discovery or an old one that just keeps giving more and more. Maybe you feel like you are faking it, or maybe you feel like it's all become a bit too familiar. Wherever you find yourself on this journey, haere mai, welcome. You are neither in nor out, you are simply just welcome on this adventure. We live in a world where groupthink and polarization, partisanism and tribalism and sectarianism and identitarianism and factionalism and dogmatism, or all the isms, whatever you want to call it, is on the rise. And it said one of the easiest ways to create community is by creating a common enemy. And we see this happening all around us. We see this play out in politics and in the media and our social circles and our jobs and our families and sadly sometimes our churches. And we have a tendency with evolutionary roots to define ourselves against or in contrast to others. But the church is not a place where we are inviting people into a club or group of ideological uniformity or theological assimilation. We are inviting people to draw from a well and to shape their life around that person. And the bizarre claim of Christianity is that truth is not a concept, truth is not an idea, truth is a person. A few years ago, I got to interview one of my favorite theologians, Greg Boyd, who has a few spicy ideas, but on the whole is pretty great. Just want you to take a moment to just sit in awe of my 12 subscribers as well. So like, share, and subscribe. No, it was for a church project, this one. Now, part of why I like Greg Boyd isn't just because he's a theologian who studied at Yale and Princeton Theological Seminary, but he's also a pastor. And decades ago, he was pastoring a church in the States. And there's a New York Times article even about this if you want to really get to speed with it. And he started preaching a series called The Cross and the Sword. And it was a series where Greg preached a warning about fusing our faith with partisan politics. And, the climate's a bit different over there, but he was sick of people asking him to preach on how to vote and for him to commit to a political ideology. And so he wanted to remind his church that the kingdom doesn't come through a political movement, but through the power, presence, and participation in the sacrificial way of Jesus. And so he said this in one of his sermons. When the church wins the culture wars, it inevitably loses. When it conquers the world, it becomes the world. I am so sorry to tell you that America is not the light of the world and the hope of the world. The light of the world and the hope of the world is Jesus Christ. 750 people left his church after this sermon series. Then on the 4th of July, of all days, he went back for more and on the issue and got another 250 people to leave. 25% of his church left because he said essentially this: Christianity is about Jesus. Now, Greg has a lot of beliefs that would actually fit into the evangelical rights box, but he refused to be fenced in. He just wanted to preach Christ crucified. And as we see division in our politics and in our social circles, sometimes in our churches, let's keep the main thing the main thing. Let's be unified around the truth embodied by the person of Christ. And let's commit our lives to journeying and knowing this truth more. Sheila Pritchard, who provided us with our fences and wells image at the beginning, challenges us with some questions. Are our lives dynamically connected to their source in Jesus and freely and fearlessly crossing boundaries to attract others to the same well? Or have we lapsed into complacent sheltering inside a respectable theological fence which hides our own lack of movement and serves mainly to keep others out? As you go this morning, may you draw deeply from the well of Christ. May you meet Christ in everyone you welcome and everyone who welcomes you. And may your life become an open invitation for others to come and drink from that same well. Amen.